Will music producers be replaced by AI? This is $1 million question that producers are literally racking their brains over daily.
What's wrong with you, bro? What the heck? You tripping, bro. You tripping.
Today I'm going to be reacting to a video by a producer named Nathan James Larson speaking on the changing landscape of beat making and music production in the era of AI. Will we be replaced by a couple of clicks on a DAW? We never know. Let's go ahead and take a look at this video. Make sure you stay tuned to the very end because you're sure to walk away with a ton of value. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Well, I think I am going to get a lot of hate for this video, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you are a beat maker, you are in the most trouble right now when it comes to AI music production, and I'm going to explain why. But while this might make some of you very angry, my hope is that others will take this as a wake-up call, a reason to push toward being more than a beat maker. This video is not about dunking on beat makers, it's not about calling you less than, it's about telling you an uncomfortable truth, that beat making alone is not enough to compete with AI, and it's one of the first things AI will replace. Now, this is not me saying quit music. This is not me saying stop making beats. This is me saying that if you want a career, if you want a job, if you want to make money doing this, then you are in serious trouble unless you make some changes. So let me explain why beat makers specifically are more vulnerable than producers, artists, or engineers.
Yes, I'm glad he said that. And that gets into something I've been thinking about lately, and that's really beat making as a service. So what do I mean by that? So at the end of the day, recording artists like going to studios, they like recording with other people. They like being in rooms and environments that are just not them by themselves. So beat making as a service is really you learning how to record and also learning how to make beats on the spot. For example, let's say a recording artist has a certain vision for a song. You can go ahead and cook up that vision. You can shape the instrumental on the song that they're looking for, and then also you can record the vocals to it. Also, let's just say type beats on YouTube don't go anywhere and they're still there and artists have them and they want to record to them. At the same time, you could still create different beats to the same song that was created on the type beat, just giving the recording artist some variation. Sometimes they have a lot of different verses and they don't quite know, they can't find the right beat and the right groove. So the song they create to the type beat works as like a demo or a reference. Then they come to your studio or your environment in general, and then you guys cook up a beat with a better feel, with more energy, that's more tailor-made towards what they're looking for. So like you said, beat making is still going to be here, but I'm looking at it more so as a service in studio for recording artists. But let's go ahead and get back into the video.
We need to start with why beat makers are most at risk. And the very first reason is that beat making is largely template driven. Most beat making revolves around genre conventions, chord packs, drum loops, splice loops, melody packs, tempo norms, structure norms, and a huge part of the value propositions that beat makers have is speed, efficiency, and type beats. Drake type beats, Travis Scott type beats, insert whatever artist you want type beats, which means by definition, you're trying to replicate something that already exists. And here's the problem. If the value that you bring is I can make beats faster than other people, AI destroys that value instantly. Because AI is trained on patterns, norms, structures, and conventions, which is exactly what type beats are. AI can already do this faster than you, and it's only going to get better.
That's a great point. Type beats aren't always necessarily replicas. Sometimes those type beat titles are more so just for SEO purposes where people can get similar vibes, but there definitely are still structural instrument choice and sound norms that are definitely put out there amongst the community. That being said, I really see us moving backwards in order to move forward. So what do I mean by that? I mean that those rapid fire beat making, I have 80 beats in a week, I have 100 beats in a week, those days may not be so viable in the future. And I say that because, like you mentioned, we're using splice loops, we're using loop packs, MIDI packs, and these things are relatively predictable for AI to pick up. But if you want to tailor make something specifically for a recording artist, paying for the studio time, and you can really take your time to make something that's deep, that's real. If a recording artist books 3 hours with you and all they do is walk away with one beat and one song, some people might say, man, I did 5 songs in that time frame, and that could work for one recording artist, but another recording artist could say, wait, no. What me and this producer made is special. We just got the drum beat and we got one instrument, then we recorded to it, and man, what we got right now is fire. But I'm gonna go back to that same studio next weekend and we're gonna finish that song. And once we put it out, it's gonna be it. We're gonna take our time. We're gonna really make it something that people aren't just going to consume and push away really quickly. It's gonna stick to the ribs like a good meal. Go ahead and get back into the video.
The second reason is that beat makers rarely own the meaning of the music. Hear me say this. Beat makers rarely own the actual meaning of the music. Most beat makers operate on quantity, in other words, volume. Make as many beats as humanly possible. Upload the beats to whichever beat platform you use, or social media, or spamming artists' DMs with beats and hope for a placement. But when an artist is shopping for beats, are they finding the meaning of that music in the beat? No. They're window shopping. Beats become a supermarket of musical materials in a way, right? Which one kind of fits what I already have in my head? That means that you don't own the story, you don't own the message, you're not the face, you're not the performer, and you're not shaping the overall creative vision. You're providing raw material. And raw material is the easiest thing to replace. Just look at companies right now that are already doing this, like Splice, which are generating melodies and samples using AI. All you do is say what kind of vibe you're going for, and boom, now you have usable parts you can drag and drop into your song. So the producers making those materials as well are also in serious trouble.
That's a good point. I've had personal experiences where recording artists have written songs on their mobile device and they're like, I found this type beat on YouTube. It kind of fits, but it kind of doesn't. And I want something that's just more, that fits it more. So I've pulled up different beats that I've already had created. I've made beats on the spot, and I've been in the process of working to merge that story that the artist is trying to tell with some type of instrumental that I have or that I'm gonna make on the spot. And that's important because once you're in the studio with a recording artist, you can start to coach them. You can start to throw out different ideas. You can say, hey, I know that your cadence was originally like this, but what if you rapped it or sang it like this? And then it would fit the beat, and then the instrumentation also fits the message that you're trying to do. So it's really just the fusion of storytelling from instruments to the original instrument, which is the human voice, and the melding and the creation of a story. So once again, guys, I definitely do see more artists wanting to get in studio with producers in the upcoming future, just because they could get totally burnt out by ultra perfect, ultra quote unquote good instrumentals that are already out there online. So let's go ahead and get back into the video.
Outside of the beat making ecosystem, the producer role is very different. When I'm working with artists as a producer, I'm working with them. I'm not supplying parts. I'm overseeing the entire process. I'm helping shape the song, the emotion, the structure, the performance, the ultimate meaning. I'm challenging ideas. I'm asking, are you sure about that? Well, what if we do this over here instead? I'm helping bring the song to life. And artists inherently view that role very differently than someone who is supplying beats. And this isn't just me. I'm not saying, look at me, I'm awesome. This is producers overwhelmingly. This is what the job of a producer is outside of hip hop and outside of beat making. Artists have a very different level of respect and trust with producers who have buy-in on the entire process. That's why producers like Benny Blanco or Ryan Tedder are absolutely irreplaceable. They are embedded into the very process. Artists need them to get the song across the finish line in its best form. And many artists attribute their music success to the producers they work with. Artists that I work with, they'll tag me when they release music, and they're gonna say things like, I could not have done this without you. But are artists tagging the beat makers with that level of reverence and respect? And if they do, it's likely out of a moral obligation to give credit, because truthfully, the artist probably doesn't even know your real name.
Yes, the producer versus the beat maker. You know, in the hip hop genre, we definitely always go back and forth on it. To his point, one thing that really helped me from the transition from beat making to traditional music production was the understanding of how to record. What is gain staging? How am I managing the signal flow? What is a preamp? How does the compressor really work in and out? What is really happening with the compressor? And a lot of beat makers, you already have a leg up on a lot of things. You have a baseline understanding of the different tools that you already have, as opposed to maybe someone who's just straight up raw, bare bones coming straight into music school and trying to learn everything there. As a beat maker, you already have a leg up. Then you just have to skill up and practice with the human voice and actually mixing everything together in a final record. So don't feel like these type of things are just beyond your scope. Take things bit by bit, piece by piece. If you have to book studio time in your city with someone who works at a studio, definitely do that. But let's go ahead and get back into the video.
I have all of my artists' phone numbers, and we talk all the time during the process. We're texting back and forth, we're on the phone. Artists come back to me not because I made a cool track, but because they trust my instincts, they value my creative insight, they want my direct involvement in shaping their music. I'm physically present during vocal sessions, and I directly coach the artist to make sure that the performances are as good as possible. I'm helping them know where to breathe. I help them understand the emotion to try singing. I guide them through vocal layering. I'm helping them with harmonies if they need it. Not every artist needs it, obviously. Producers are oftentimes more than just a music collaborator. We're frequently the emotional support an artist has. When I'm writing songs with artists, we're often tapping into the things they are afraid to talk about, or working on songs that feel very personal to them. And that takes care. That takes a massive amount of trust. So AI can generate raw material, but AI cannot do that deep level of collaboration and support. The third reason that beat makers are in trouble is that the internet trained AI on beat makers. This is really uncomfortable but true. The same systems that normalized type beats and, these mass uploads on social media and beat platforms, in hijacking SEO titles and doing the quantity over quality. These are the same systems that AI was trained on. In a very real sense, beat makers train their own replacement. When your entire approach is modeling directly after something else, it becomes very easy to replicate.
Producers training their own replacements. And that's what I've been seeing whenever I take a look at some of these different Suno videos. To be perfectly honest, some of the things that have been coming out sound really good. They're not quite there yet as far as authenticity, but they're getting to sound pretty good. I've heard some things and I'm like, whoa, that actually sounds pretty good. But at the same time, my question is, at what point will these platforms not need you to prompt them? If that makes sense. So if you're in something like Suno, and you're creating these different drum loops, instrument loops, at what point will it just be autonomous to where you won't even be needed? And at the same time, some of the things that you're feeding into these platforms like Suno is using it to train even more. So if you have something really unique and original, then you drop it into Suno, then that's being trained on it. So it's a tricky situation that we're in. I think we need to reevaluate how much we're valuing speed and convenience. Like you mentioned, that speed and convenience could be walking us into a trap. It's kind of like fast food. We want things fast, but sometimes we don't think about the health implications or the consequences of getting things at a rapid rate. There's benefits to things that take much longer, like a nice, hearty, home-cooked meal. It's not as quick. It's not as convenient, but it's something that the value is much more long-term. So let's definitely think about that as producers. Let's not always rush to certain things. We do need to find a balance because the market is definitely changing, but I have been echoing some of the thoughts that Nathan here is speaking about. There's the need for a producer in studio to work with a recording artist. So let's go ahead and get back into the video.
And on top of that, beat makers often brag about speed. I made this beat in 10 minutes, sat down and whipped out 10 beats today, right? Heck, we got speed beat videos, right? Where beat makers are showing off how fast they can slap a beat together. Now, we'll just ignore that most of it's fake and pre-planned. That's a topic for another time. But this really does beg a hard question. If it takes only 10 minutes, how defensible is that skill? Now, I'm not saying skill equals time, but let's be honest, making a loop is not the same thing as producing a song. Making a beat or a melody is not the same thing as taking a song from an idea to final release and everything that happens in between, because there is a lot that happens in between. Now, I've made videos on my channel with timelines like trying to write, produce, and release a song in 12 hours or 24 hours. And you wanna know what's really wild? I get comments of people who are like, well, XYZ beatmaker could do that in 10 minutes, or I could make a track in an hour. What's so hard about this? When I say I spent 12 hours producing something, I'm talking about writing full songs, recording real instruments, tracking vocals and vocal layers, editing vocals, editing every live element.
The process of making the beat and the process of producing the song is much different. So, for example, some people have had issues with the idea of beat leasing because so many different people will have the same beat and they're like, oh, you know, I don't want one person having the same beat. I'd rather, you know, wait and find somebody to cook something up in the studio. You know, there's just been various different thought process on beat leasing. But one of the main things that always stood out to me with like a sore thumb is that the same beat can be made into so many different songs, so many different feels and stories and energies. And I've heard one version of a song made to my beat and I'm like, that's way this way. And then another version is just like a totally different energy. And I'm like, wow, it's the same beat, but the feel of it is just so different because you two as recording artists, as songwriters, just approached it in so many different ways. And that gets back to what he was speaking about, song production versus beat production or beat making. They're really two different things. As a producer in studio, you can coach, you can say, let's do that ad lib, or, ooh, don't do that part. That sounds weird. Let's go ahead and cut that part out. You know, those are really two different skill sets. So I can really see that value of the in-studio producer just really skyrocketing in the upcoming years to come. So guys, don't sleep on it. Don't always overvalue speed. Remember, there is the process of the actual song production. And that's one thing I really want you guys to learn as well. But let's get back into the video.
Let's just talk about editing for a second, because that alone at least takes an hour. Building a whole emotional world around the song, mixing and mastering, but you can do it in 10 minutes? Okay. Because that's not looping 8 bars with 10 tracks. A lot of my productions are between 100 and 200 tracks. This isn't a morning job. Trust me, if professional producers wanted to crank out quantity over quality, they would, but they don't, which I'll explain why in a bit.
Well, to me, those are really two different skill sets, and I wouldn't want to undermine producers or the quote unquote beat makers who are able to make a lot of beats that are quality quickly. Sometimes in the studio, the recording artist just wants something done from scratch and they like the experience of watching someone cook up a beat relatively quickly, even if it's not 10 minutes, but maybe even 20 minutes or 30 minutes, even if it's a skeleton. And that's the thing. Whenever you're in the studio, I've noticed that recording artists are much more receptive to a skeleton. And that's why in my Heat Check Live beat review show that you can, of course, submit to in the description, I mentioned to a lot of producers that you don't want to overfill the track because we still have the human voice, the recording artist, which is the last instrument. And if you overstuff everything, they won't have any room to breathe and to tell their story. And at the same time, if you're in the studio cooking up those beats from scratch, it's easier for the recording artist to point out not to add too much. So on one hand, let's not undermine those beat makers. On the other hand, whenever we're in studio, it's much easier to, at least in my experience, impress or satisfy the recording artist because they're playing a role in selecting the sounds and making sure things sound good and feel good. Those beat makers out there, I think, is still going to be valued, but let's look into possibly creating some type of partnerships with your local recording studios so that way you can come in, make beats for recording artists, and you can learn the recording process, and they could have a beat maker who can quickly create a skeleton for a recording artist. So I feel like there's some type of partnership scenarios that could be created. Let's not be contentious with each other. We're all looking for the same goal, and I think that could be a pretty good solution, especially as AI gets better and better. But let's go ahead and get back into the video.
The fourth reason that beatmakers are in trouble, and possibly the biggest reason they are in trouble, is that beatmakers were already devaluing themselves before AI. This is extremely important to understand in the grand context of this whole thing. Even before AI, beatmaking was a race to the bottom and still is. Doing $20 leases, oversaturated markets, disposable products, artists already viewed beats as interchangeable. They would swap out the beats. I got the BPM the same, the keys the same, I'll just swap out the beats and see how it feels with my track. And when 100 artists could use the exact same beat, is that beat actually valuable? Like when I produce a record with an artist, that is now copyrighted material. And if anyone else uses it, they are infringing copyright. In other words, that is 100% exclusive to that artist. And yes, I know that some beat makers offer higher priced beats that are exclusive, and I do think that's a far better model, but still deeply flawed. But beat makers and producers are not in the same market. And many beat makers don't realize that. Yes, we both use a DAW. Yes, we both make music, but we sell completely different things. Beat makers sell a product. Producers sell collaboration.
Yes, the type beat game. There is the thing with leasing. I will give a little bit of pushback and say the beats are still valuable. Like I mentioned before, that artists can take one beat in totally different directions. And on top of that, there's the marketing aspect. Who's actually pushing the song out there where people are actually hearing that? But let's go ahead and get back into the video.
It was a problem long before. Producers sell collaboration. And this was a problem long before AI. I've actually encouraged many beat makers to step into real producer roles because the opportunity is dramatically higher. I actually have a good friend of mine who did this. He was making beats and then now he's producing artists, like working directly with them, and his income skyrocketed. And by the way, when I say real producer, I don't mean this in like a belittling way. I mean this in a substantive way. There is an actual difference. And unfortunately, a lot of beat makers get very upset to be told this. I'm friends with a producer manager who does not work with beat makers because the ceiling is just so much lower. Most producer managers don't work with beat makers because they aren't in the same business. Now that reality existed well before AI showed up. And here's the difficult thing to swallow. Very, very few beat makers actually make it. And yes, very few producers make it too, but it is much harder to make it as a beat maker with this model. And the ones that you might point to as examples of people who did, most of them actually transitioned into exactly what I'm describing. They stopped being only beat makers. They stopped selling $20 beats. If you're selling $20 beats, you have to sell an insane amount just to survive. Like, just do the math. Most of you haven't even done the math. If you want to make $50,000 per year, do you have any idea how many beats you need to sell at $20? You need to sell 2,500 beats. Think about how insane that is for a moment. 2,500. That is 208 beats per month.
Yes, beat makers who actually make it versus beat makers who don't. There's definitely a discrepancy there. It all really depends on your goal. There definitely are producers out there who are able to sustain themselves with beat making and other services. So they more so look at beat making as a product or service within a suite of other things that they do, like DJing, like mixing, like video work. On top of that, there's the question when it comes to beat makers and success. It's one thing to get there, it's another thing to sustain yourself. So there are beat makers out there who make it, who have songs out there, then they get some type of publishing deal, and it can be difficult for them to really keep themselves afloat, to maintain themselves in a certain position where they're still relevant, as opposed to music producers. I've known much more music producers in person who are able to sustain themselves full time as people who record, who mix, who maybe even master, who are kind of like just local people. They maybe had 1 or 2 hits back in the day. Maybe they know a few newer people out there who are bubbling in the city, but they have these certain skill sets that they're dealing with people all the time in person. They may have a beat store, but they're really out there. They're at the local events. They're at open mics. They're shaking hands and dealing with the people. You may not know their names, but they're able to sustain a full-time income and support a family because they have all these different skills that are difficult to replace. There are more people out there that I've seen who are able to weather the storms, the ups and the downs, everything that goes on in the music game. Those tend to be the ones who are there 10 years, 15 years later, as opposed to beat makers. It could be much more challenging just because of all the competition that's out there. But let's go ahead and get back into the video.
On the flip of this, I currently produce about 15 to 20 songs per year for other artists. And that makes me between $45,000 and $60,000 a year. That's only 15 to 20. That's not even the same ballpark. And this is not me saying, look at me, I'm awesome. Because if I wanted to produce full time, I would be well into the 6 figures producing just a handful of songs per month. And I don't do this, not because I can't, I don't do this because I don't want to. I'm happy working with a very small number of artists and focusing on my own projects. In fact, when I get asked to produce for other artists, most of the time, I'm the one saying no. People think it's so hard to have a career as a producer, but the truth is that it is way, way harder to make it as a beat maker. And again, this is all before AI stepped in. That's the difference between the race to the bottom and building leverage. Now, if this feels harsh, I get it, but I said at the very beginning of this video that my hope is some of you make a change. And here's how you don't get replaced and what to do instead. You become indispensable. You stop being someone who makes pieces of songs. You become a producer who finishes full songs and collaborates deeply with artists. You build an identity that is not based on someone else. If everyone knows you as the Drake type beat guy, you don't have a brand at all. You're simply a reflection of someone else. And trust me, that person that you're an example of is the better version.
Let me go ahead and touch on that point as far as being indispensable, being irreplaceable. One thing that I've seen here, especially on YouTube, is I've seen different types of marketing for different courses and things like that. And of course, if you find a course that you find valuable, definitely invest in yourself. Check it out. Make sure it's coming from a legit person and just give it a try. I'm not anti-course. I'm not one of those people. But what I can say is I definitely see the marketing of aspiration or taking advantage of people who are naive and feel like they can hit these really lofty numbers when it comes to selling beats. And if you're not hitting that point, it's something that you're doing, and then you need to go to that same person for more products to get to that point. So it becomes this kind of long-term draining of a person. And I definitely don't want to see you guys doing that. When it comes to music production, one thing I can say as far as the in-person audio engineering, music production kind of hybrid he's referring to is there's going to be people in your city, if you're in a mid-sized city or a large city, who've been producing for quite a while, who have a whole lot of information that they want to share, but that's not quite as cool as landing a placement with Drake or 21 Savage and having all these different posts on Instagram. It's not as cool to be around the 50-year-old person who has a ton of information as it is to buying a course from the 19-year-old person who's going to possibly sell you aspiration. Not saying it's that way all the time, but some of them do that. And there's so much more value in that 50-year-old person who, once again, may not be the coolest, may not have the most swag, but they got a lot of information, a lot of game, a lot of value that they can use to help you actually develop the career, as opposed to maybe something that's more short term. So I definitely implore you guys, please take a look, do your Googles, look up recording studios in your area and just book some time. You could be able to develop an internship. You might be able to possibly get a job there as an assistant engineer, or you could just pop up every so often. One person could take a liking to you, y'all become friends, and y'all just share information with each other. So let's go ahead and get back into the video.
Artists come to me because they want my sound. Think of Phineas, by the way, right? Billie Eilish's brother. all the people that want to work with him. Why? Because of who he is, his sound, what he brings to the table, his tastes, his instincts, right? It's the same for me. I'm known for a very specific thing. I'm known for cinematic production blended with pop and other genres. So artists who want that thing, they come to me. Not because I sound like someone else, but because I sound like me. They see something specific and they're like, I want that. My goal with this video is not to make people fearful. It's to help people understand the way things are changing, and also, by the way things happen, because this isn't new, and how to make it so that you don't get left behind. If you love making beats, this is a hobby and a passion, keep going. Who cares what I say? Who cares if AI is here or not? Who cares if AI is going to replace every single beat maker? If you just love making music, you love making beats, keep going. Doesn't matter. You can ignore everything I said, right? But if you want a career, you want a job, you want to get to a spot where music is the thing actually paying your bills, then you need to make a change. Stop and think of that number again. 2,500. That's just to make 50,000 per year. That's not even like a crazy good income. That is a massive amount of sales necessary. If you want to make 6 figures, you're talking 5,000. 5,000. Or you could pivot and become the producer who oversees the whole process, collaborates directly with artists, and become an irreplaceable member of the artist team and have a far greater chance of success. Even a great beat maker of our time, like Oakfelder, they're working directly with artists.
Definitely co-sign that, guys. Please keep making beats. You want to be skilled at making beats, even if you do become more of a traditional producer, engineer, hybrid in the studio. You want to be able to cook up fire. Somebody's feeling something, you want to be able to get behind FL Studio and Logic, and within their studio time that they've booked with you, you want to be able to still make something. So I've done that. I've been under pressure. Whenever you're recording and you're working as a producer, it's much more predictable. It's almost like you're getting into being like a barber or a hairstylist. You're creating a book of business where so much of what you do is going to be contingent on your reputation. It's going to be a lot of word of mouth. You do a good job, someone hears what you did, they're going to say, hey, who did that? And then one person becomes 2 people, become 3 people become 4. And then before you know it, you're having to find structure and to manage your time and to deal with multiple people at once. And then from there, your income can be much more predictable, as opposed to selling beats can be really good. And then sometimes it can be really dry. And I have been on that same boat of saying that traditional producer role, let's make sure we're learning how to record, so that way we have more value for recording artists. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit like and subscribe. My name is Desmond A, and I'll be back with more great videos. Peace. Wait, before you go, make sure you go to DesmondASounds.com, where you can get free FL Studio patcher plugins, free loops, free guides, everything you need to level up your music production. Once again, go to DesmondASounds.com or click the link in the description. Go there now and totally transform your music production.